With the newest entry into the main Zelda franchise on the horizon after 6 long years, we really need to ask a simple question. Will Tears of the Kingdom be a disappointment? Now before people comment and say, don't hate on the game before it comes out, I am really wanting this game to be amazing. I am not on my own when I say Breath of the Wild is one of my favourite games of all time, and I want to just discuss the game. Tears of the Kingdom has been delayed a few times now. It was originally meant to be announced at E3 2020, but a certain virus took over the world, and instead it got properly announced at E3 2021, along with many other games. It had a 2022 release window, which has since been pushed back to the current release date of May 12, 2023. With only a few weeks to discuss this topic before it releases, I think we should try and answer this question once and for all. Now, before we carry on, we need to address the fact that delays happen constantly in development. Random bugs might pop up, anything could happen in development, and it's normal. Lots of games have been delayed in the past, and their reception between them is very different. Some games like Team Fortress 2 and even the last mainline Zelda game Breath of the Wild have become massive icons in gaming, being recognisable anywhere. However, there are also games that have done negatively due to delays. One game that could be used as an example of how delays can affect development is Cyberpunk 2077. The game was set to release around 10 years before it came out, but has been delayed that much that it released in 2020. The game was insanely hyped by fans, and after it released, there was a ton of bugs and game-breaking glitches that ruined the experience for everyone. This can overall show us that delays can either make a game great, or it can make it awful. So, how about we start off with what criteria we should use to consider it a good sequel? In my opinion, there's around 3 major things that it needs to do. Firstly, it must innovate over the original in some way. Secondly, is to provide new locations and new experiences. And the third is to carry on the story that was presented in the original. So let's start with the first subject. What does Tears of the Kingdom do to innovate over the original? Well, Tears of the Kingdom has 4 new abilities, these being Recall, which is the ability to recall an object through time. There is also Fuse, which is the ability to fuse tools and objects around the world, which can create fire arrows, ice arrows, all of those. There is Ultra Hand, which is the ability to connect objects to create buildings and even vehicles to traverse the land of Hyrule. And lastly, there is Ascend, which is another traversal ability to go through the ceilings of buildings and caves. These are already a massive change to the original game. In the original, there was Bombs, Magnesis, Stasis, and Cryonis as your abilities, and we all know what they do. They can stop time, they can pick up objects, you can freeze water. And yet these new ones seem to be so much more advanced. They seem to all be built off the original, which is the best way to innovate in a game like this. Overall, I would cross off the innovation category as a positive and say that this game does properly innovate to our current knowledge. Now that we've properly discussed point number 1, I think it's important that we move on to point number 2, which is a new location. Most amazing sequels will have a brand new location to go to and carry on the adventure from the last game. Metal Gear Solid 2 had the Big Shell, which was a replacement for Shadow Moses. Arkham City took place in a sectioned off area of Gotham, and it was different from the Asylum that the first game took place in. And lastly, God of War 2018 took place in Norse mythology, and all of the realms involved, instead of the Greek mythology that the previous game had built upon. Zelda games don't often stray from the area of Hyrule. There are some examples, which are Wind Waker, which still takes place in Hyrule, but it's been changed due to a flood that happened, covering up all of the previously known areas. There was Majora's Mask, which is set in Termina, another area of the world. And then there was also Skyward Sword, that took place in the distant past of Hyrule instead. From the gameplay we've seen so far, it seems like Tears of the Kingdom will take place in normal Hyrule. This does not mean it's a negative point, because it still builds upon Hyrule. You can see in multiple shots Hyrule Castle floating off the ground, and even some restored shots of inside. This is also alongside the new floating islands and new cave systems that we'll be able to explore, along with the various amounts of dungeons that I'm almost certain will appear in the game. At least for me, I'd say that this crosses off point 2 of a new location, as it changes the original that much that it will be barely recognisable. So, the final point is arguably the most important. Does it work with the story that the previous game established? So, an example of this could be God of War Ragnarok, which is a direct follow-on from God of War 2018, and follows the story almost exactly. So, when it comes to Tears of the Kingdom story, we really don't know anything yet. We know that Ganondorf is back, and we know that Link and Zelda get separated somehow, and that's about it. Link gets some new abilities from somewhere, and yeah, that's about it. So we can see that it follows the same story as Breath of the Wild, the same timeline, and likely it will follow on from that story properly, which I would say is a positive and takes care of point 3 as a whole. So, now that we've reached the end, and all 3 points have been ticked off, overall, I personally think it will be a good sequel. Does that mean it will be a great sequel? I don't know yet. We have still got a few weeks as of recording till we find that out properly. I hope it's a really good game, and I'd love to hear anyone's opinions in the comments on what they think the game's going to be like from what we've seen. So far, really, bunch of positive things we've seen, and yeah, I just really hope it's positive. And if you'd like to see any more from me, you know to hit that like, comment and subscribe, and share the video with someone that might find this video interesting. And yeah, that's it for the video. Bye.